All right, hello and an official welcome to this Deakin University virtual event presented in conjunction with our UK and Europe alumni chapter. Our topic today is creativity and innovation in work, life and play, from Deakin to Lego. And we're looking forward to hearing from our wonderful alumni guest speaker, Ben Campbell, very soon, as well as some special guests from Deakin's School of Communication and Creative Arts. Sam Johnson here from Deakin's Alumni Engagement Team. It's great to have you with us. As we gather for this event, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let's take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands on which we do our business. We acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of all the lands we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. Now, in a moment, I'll hand over to Dr. Erin Hawley, Senior Lecturer in Communication at Deakin, to tell you a bit more about our event. And Erin will also be running our Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So over to you, Erin.
Thanks very much, Sam, and hello everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this exciting event, and I'm delighted to be speaking to Deakin alumni, students and guests from across the world. My name is Erin Hawley. I'm the course director for postgraduate communication here at Deakin, which makes today's presentation all the more exciting for me because today you will be hearing from one of our Master of Communication alumni, Ben Campbell. And Ben will be talking about creativity, which is such an interesting concept. On the one hand, it's a very childlike and playful quality. We all know that kids can be very creative, including when they're playing with Lego. But this childlike concept is also now a goal of many businesses, organizations, and content creators across industry boundaries. Creativity is a skill, a practice, and a problem-solving technique. It is something that is complex, elusive, and incredibly valuable. And I know that it is something all of us tuning in today share an interest in. So thank you once again for joining us at this exciting event. Don't forget that you can ask questions, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of today's session. So please do submit your questions to the Q&A panel if you have them. To begin today's proceedings, I'm very pleased to introduce you to the head of the School of Communication and Creative Arts here at Deakin, Professor Matt Delbridge. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Erin. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Welcome to all of the Deakin family out there joining in from across Australia and the world. And as Erin said, I'm the head of School for Communication and Creative Arts. And any of you who've studied journalism or PR or advertising, any of the comms areas, writing, literature, gender studies, filmmaking, animation, design, photography, art, theatre, dance, TV, regardless of whether you did a degree or a unit, not only are you an alum of Deakin, but you're also an alum of our school. And it's our graduates who define who we are as an institution. They maintain our connections to industry in the world, and all of your stories are our story. I'm an alumni from Deakin as well. And so today, as we're talking about creativity, I want everyone to remember that broadly speaking, all of us exercise our creative muscles throughout our lives, whether we're conscious of it or not. Creativity is something that we learn. It's not something that's only inherited. And like anything else, the more we live our lives, the more inventive and creative we become. And that's what we do in our school. So thank you for joining us, and let me get on with introducing our very special guest alumni, Ben Campbell. So Ben is a senior marketing strategist with over 12 years of experience driving communication strategy for brands across Europe, Asia, and Australia. Ben's passionate about the intersection between brands and culture, finding compelling human truths and reverse engineering audience behaviour. I love that, Ben. In his role as a senior global communication strategist for the Lego Group, Ben is responsible for developing the strategic approach across global Lego advertising campaigns. This involves traditional strategic planning, leading creative ideation, and working across the business to ensure that Lego campaigns tap into the full breadth of the Lego ecosystem and are executable across different countries, regions, and continents. Ben, I'm exhausted just going through that. How do you get through the day? In practice for Ben, this might include overseeing user and product testing, ideating the next big brand idea, and chasing around kids on a television commercial shoot. Ben completed his Bachelor of Arts and Master of Communications at Deakin University and has a grad dip in law from Monash. Now, I'll hand over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Sam, and thank you, Erin, and thanks to, I guess, the wonderful Deakin community that have all tapped in tonight. I think it's pretty late for the Melbourne time zone, so I'm very chuffed and very honoured to have the chance to speak to you all a little bit about my experience at Lego, and I guess some of the experiences through my career working in the creative industry as well. So without further ado, I'll share my screen, and let's hope that we have no technical challenges today. Excellent. I'll dive right in. So I appreciate the introduction, and I won't go over myself too much here. My journey has been a really interesting one, and I started my career as a journalist. I'm not sure I was ever a particularly great journalist, but I was somewhat on the payroll at some stage. Worked as a lecturer in China for a period of time as well, lecturing in marketing and business. So it was an unusual pathway out of university. I spent time working as a media buyer at Havas. Humbled my way into PR somehow and had a really wonderful early point in my career there. And I guess what I've done for the greater part of the last 8 or 9 years really has been some form of marketing strategy, whether that's strategic planning in an advertising context, creative strategy, some organizations might call it. But essentially what I do is I connect brands between their business problems through to the creative output and that whole beautiful piece in the middle there as well. Alternatively, I think if you ask my mother what I do, she'll either say that I do things on the computer, or she'll just describe me as a wandering, restless Australian. And I think part of, I guess, my identity, not by design, but somewhat by accident, I've spent more time out of Australia the past 10 or 11 years than I have spent in the country. And I've been super lucky to live and work in Asia. But the last 5 or 6 years I've been living in Europe. So I first came to Denmark with the Lego Group all the way back in the end of 2016. And since then I've spent time working still for Lego in Norway and most recently in the UK as well. So life is somewhat between multiple continents at the moment. And that's kind of the way I like it. What I do, my day job, I'm a Senior Global Communication Strategist at Lego, and that's a very much a mouthful of a job title. We tend to just do this to confuse people, I think. But essentially, my role is to develop the global advertising campaigns for the company. So again, taking a business problem and a business and a marketing objective, for example, selling products, and finding out a way to bring that to life creatively to millions of people around the world in multiple markets, which is just a fascinating place to be. I think the photo on the left-hand side here was actually my first day at the Lego Group, going back to the start of 2017. My first day I was like trudging through snow, but I had my shiny new ID card, so that made things a little less painful. The second photo is from the Lego canteen, which is where we have all of our meals. We have a Lego campus. We're very spoilt there. We have Lego chefs and Lego baristas, and we're very, very well looked after. And I think one of the biggest downsides of the pandemic is I haven't been able to go in and get my free lunch, which I very, very much do miss. And one of the questions that we get often asked is, do you get free Lego? Do you get given a lot of Lego? And the answer is yes. I have more Lego bricks than I will ever have enough to do with. And the example on the right-hand side is a nice little Volkswagen, which was actually my mother's car when I was growing up as well. So it's a nice little throwback. I think there's a huge benefit for the employees that have kids and nephews and nieces, because they have unlimited Christmas gifts seemingly on tap, and they're very lucky to have that. I work in the Lego agency. So within the Lego Group, there is an internal advertising agency, which is becoming more and more of a trend across the industry as more and more organizations look to have an internal advertising function. We have 600 employees in the Lego agency, which actually makes us one of the biggest advertising agencies in the north of Europe. And of course, the headquarters is at the same place the Lego corporate headquarters is in Denmark. So 500 of those employees are in the HQ in Billund in rural Denmark. And about 100 other employees are spaced in our hubs around the world. So we have a hub in London, a hub in Enfield in Connecticut in the US, in Shanghai, and also in Singapore. So that makes up the majority of the Lego agency. We're responsible not just for global advertising, but also for things like packaging, instruction manuals, and a whole range of different things that are put out by the Lego Group as well. So this presentation is broken into two parts. And the first one, I think that's what you're all here to see. It's me talking specifically about Lego as a case study and talking about, I guess, the lessons that I've learned over the last 5 years of working for, what is consistently judged the world's most reputable brand. And the second part is really just some personal insights that I've gathered myself, just from my life working in multiple industries and multiple continents, and just the things that I've taken away from that as well. And I'm aware there's probably a lot of people on this call that are thinking, what's a 30-year-old doing talking about somebody in their 30s talking about life lessons. But I've had a few things that I'm hoping will benefit and add some value to those on the call as well. So I'll jump straight into it. And the first thing I wanted to do was start with a case study, because I think what this does is this shows you, I guess, the scale and the scope and the kind of work that we do. And I want to start with the Bugatti Chiron. And this is a Lego Technique product. And with Lego Technique, we're always trying to emphasize very, very much how real our cars are. There's a genuine product promise in this. If you look under the hood of a Lego Porsche or a Lamborghini, you see the same components that you would find in the genuine article. Now, before I play this video, I just want to say that we regularly build big things out of Lego. It's something we do really, really well. It requires very little strategic marketing thinking. Build a big thing out of Lego, put it in a museum or a car show, people will love it. And one day we were building a giant car to put into a car show, and a junior production assistant turned around and said, well, what if we made a Bugatti Chiron out of Lego that could actually drive? Challenge accepted. We wrote a brief for our model shop in the Czech Republic, and we asked them to get to work and find a way to bring this to life. This Bugatti Chiron that you're looking at in the video on the screen here is made entirely out of Lego bricks. The engine, the headlights, the steering wheel, the chassis, all of these beautiful curves are made entirely out of Lego bricks. The only thing that's not Lego is the tires and the wheels, because we actually couldn't find a way to do that. The engine that you're looking at as well was made by 2,300 Lego Power Functions electric motors. These are the same functions that you might have at home in your Lego sets for Lego Technique. It took about 12 months. We built it, a few hiccups along the way, a lot of convincing project managers that this was a sensible way to spend money, which is always a fun conversation to have. And then we went and got Andy Wallace, a real race car driver, to sit behind the wheel and see what happens when we started it up. And the great thing about Andy actually has test driven the real Bugatti Chiron. So he should know exactly what to do when he hops behind the wheel here. We took this thing to a very windy and wet racetrack in Georgia. The first day we couldn't test it because it was raining too much. The second day, we finally got this thing ready, and we pressed the power button to see if it would drive. And sure enough, it did. It took off. 18 miles an hour. So not quite the 261 miles an hour that the real Bugatti might be able to do, but not a bad feat of engineering, I'm sure you'll agree. So we took this car on road shows around the world. It crossed continents, and all because of some ridiculous idea that we had in Denmark one day. And we thought, can we actually dare to make a car out of Lego that drives? And the reason I use this as a case study is because this project itself reminds me of two things. And the first thing is that a great idea can come from anywhere. Even a junior production manager that just had an idea and put up her hand and said, well, could we do this? And the second thing I realized that I showed this case study for, it's how lucky I am and how lucky we are to be able to work at a company where you can scale an idea that is so big, particularly when there's no immediate direct return on investment from doing this, right? But our ridiculous ideas are rewarded. And I think that's a wonderful kind of company to work for as well. I'll also say that our audience expects us to be creative. And I think when you go and do things like the Bugatti Chiron that I just showed you, you set a bit of an expectation for what the business will deliver year in, year out. And we're not Colgate, and that's nothing against Colgate, but I think people expect a different type of advertising and communication from their toothpaste company as they do from a brand like Lego. So there is actually immense pressure for us to be able to do stuff like this every year. And even internally of the company, people say, what's the next Bugatti, right? But we do face the same challenges as other brands do as well. We are enormous. And I think that's the biggest challenge of the company. Everything is at such a big scale. If you talk about the US marketing team, for example, you're talking about hundreds of people. And sometimes even just finding the right connection, the right contact in the organization is basically a full-time job in itself. We're super complex. We have multiple marketing departments, multiple IT functions. I think we found once that we had a second IT department that had grown overnight. And this is the kind of thing that only happens in a large, complex organization. And we're inherently global, so part of the challenge of my job is to try and come up with a strategic idea and a piece of creative work that works just as well in the US and the UK and Germany as it does in much smaller markets, perhaps like Australia or Poland or the Czech Republic. So how do we scale these kind of ideas, but still remain considerate of the local nuances in each market as well? I'll also say that as an organization, and people often ask, what is it like inside the company? I would say that we are less pinstripe and we are more rolled up sleeves. We have a super flat structure, and anyone who's familiar with Scandinavian and Nordic companies and the way of doing work in this part of the world will probably testify to the same thing. An intern can challenge the CEO, and I've seen this in meetings. And the most beautiful thing is when you're in a meeting with people from Lego, you actually don't know who the CEO is, and you don't know who the directors are, you don't know who the managers are. You can't tell because everyone just dresses the same. Everyone gives each other the same time and space to ask questions and challenge each other. And that is just a beautiful piece of organizational design that I would love to take back to me with Australia one day. I'll also say that we're a very trust-based environment. There's a real acknowledgement that your output is not necessarily the equals of the hours you work or the clothes that you wear. It doesn't matter. If you want to come in at 10:30 or 11 o'clock, if that works for you, then you do that. Nobody polices you to a set time. And very much this sort of flexible working environment enables creativity in many, many ways. It's also offensive to schedule meetings on a Friday. I mean, Friday in Denmark is essentially a work from home day, knock off at 12. So these are the things that you learn as you go through. After 4 o'clock in the Denmark office, the electricity goes out. And this is because they want people to actually go home. And my first few bosses at the Lego group were wonderful Danish bosses. And they would walk past my desk at 3 o'clock and they would say, "What are you still doing here? Shouldn't you be home with your family?" And again, that is just something that I just want to be able to take with me, because it's an organization that sees the full person, not just the output that you create for the company and how wealthy you make the company. It's much, much bigger than that. I'll also say that we don't have a creative process. And I think in the industry, we spend a lot of time talking about what is the right way to get great creative work. Well, at Lego, we've actually tried in many ways to essentially say, fuck the process. And I've had a leader that has looked me in the eye and said, "Ben, fuck the process." We've tried to separate our creative work from the Lego process. And what I mean by that is, essentially, we are a manufacturing company. We are one of the best manufacturing companies in the world. We make a lot of plastic. And to produce that plastic goes through a wonderful, very structured and rigid process over the course of about 12 to 18 months. That's our supply chain. We have to be really diligent to make sure that things like communication are not part of that supply chain. We have to break out because it's the only way we do great work. I'll also say that any large organization has many subcultures within it, and Lego is no different. I mean, if you go to the manufacturing side of the business, you're going to encounter a very different way of working, a different attitude towards production as you would in, say, the in-house advertising agency. And we have a wonderfully free-flowing work environment, and that's part of our culture. And we do try and protect that as much as we can because we know that it's important. But we also get out of the office. And for those of you who have been to Denmark, you've probably been to Copenhagen, I'm guessing. Lego HQ is not in Copenhagen, it's in rural Denmark. It's about 90 minutes from the German border, to the point where when I was living on the Lego campus, I would drive to Germany to do my grocery shopping because everything's a lot cheaper in Germany. But essentially the office is surrounded by agriculture farms, tractors. I think there's more pigs in rural Denmark than there are people, not necessarily a bad thing. We're a long way from the audience we serve, which is a massive problem. And it's really hard to come up with ideas that intersect culture when you're not part of that culture. And to give a really practical example, a huge part of what we do from an advertising footprint is outdoor advertising, billboards. Denmark doesn't have outdoor advertising. As a country, it doesn't exist, right? So you're asking a creative from Denmark to design something they've perhaps never seen live. So it's so important to get out of the office and see how the real world functions. We had a huge creative shift in 2018. I was super lucky to be handballed this as a task, find a way to do our creative work differently. So naturally, I took everyone to New York and Berlin, and then we got our creative workshops out of the office, and we took them to Manhattan, we took them to Berlin. We had workshops in the Porsche headquarters in Germany. We took them to places where we were inspired and we were captivated, and the ideas would just flow. And I really do believe that no great idea is going to come out of a meeting room called Meeting Room Gold 2B or something like that. You really do need to escape the vacuum of routine that is so important to come up with great ideas. But I'll also say that this is true of any big organization, and at Lego, you need to violently defend your ideas. And I think early in my career, I thought the job was just about ideas, and it's not. You know, I think having a great idea is 10% of the job, particularly working in advertising. The other 90% is progressing that idea through the organization. You know, so there's a huge amount of resilience that it takes, and it's not unusual to present your idea, which, as I guess people on this call would know, it's usually manifested in a PowerPoint deck, and you're presenting this thing 30, 40, 50 times sometimes. I'll also say that bad ideas, you know, lots of bad ideas have been solved by great salespeople, but conversely, lots of great ideas have fallen through the cracks. And I see part of my job in being a leader in this organization is not just to come up with good ideas myself, but to find good ideas. They may not have the confidence to escalate those. So grabbing those ideas and supporting those people to get their ideas through to execution is something that I'm super passionate about, and something that I love to do. But we're all responsible for great ideas. And I spoke about this with the Bugatti case study. You know, we don't rely on somebody called a creative to solve problems. We fully recognize that great problem solving might be multidisciplinary: events, PR, distribution. And what I mean by that is that if you ask an art director to solve a business problem, you know, for example, you're not able to sell Lego products in the Baltic countries, for example, an art director is probably going to try and solve that problem with a piece of video content, with an ad. Whereas you ask somebody from the global events team, they're going to suggest, why don't we run a bunch of events for kids to come and play and interact? Why don't you just start selling the product in Starbucks? Which may or may not be a good idea. But what I'm trying to say is that there are many ways to solve a problem, and it doesn't necessarily mean getting an art director to do it for you. I'll also say that some of our best ideas come from people who aren't even on the payroll, and that's kids themselves. And we spend a huge amount of time product testing. A lot of our product testing is done in Florida, because apparently that's where you find real, authentic American kids. So we go to Florida and we stand behind a mirrored glass and we watch kids interact and play with our products. And the example on the screen here is from Lego Hidden Side, which was an AR experience we launched about 2 years ago. And when we put this product in the hands of kids, we worked out really quickly that some of the things that we wanted to happen weren't necessarily happening the way that they were. And a huge amount of feedback from the kids on the app experience, the physical build, even our communication testing. We put our TVCs in front of kids before we actually produce them, inform us and tell us the direction that we should be pursuing. So we learn so much from kids. They are the ultimate source of energy and creativity, as all of you with children would know. I'll also say that, and this is advice as much of it's a reality in Lego, we don't wait for the right brief. And at Lego, we are briefed twice a year to make global advertising campaigns, but the best briefs consistently have come from proactive pitches. They weren't part of the plan. And the case study you can see in the background here is Rebuild the World. This was a Lego brand campaign from 2019, which still lives on today in different ways. And this is our brand platform. This never would have been briefed to us, because our briefs are on a product level. They go and make a campaign for Lego City, for Lego Technique, go and make a campaign for Lego Friends. Nobody was looking at it holistically, but the ad agency pitched that we should be doing brand campaigns. We need to level up our strategic thinking and our framework and the way we communicate our brand, because we are bigger than our products. And that was something that came out of proactive pitching. So what I'm saying is, don't wait for the right brief to hit your desk in an organization, because the perfect brief doesn't exist, and it will probably never come. And sometimes it's up for you to be able to craft it. I talk a lot about internal incubators, and whenever I'm asked to talk specifically about innovation, this is one of the topics that I keep coming back to. And at Lego, we built an internal incubator to test and learn and bring things to market quickly. Products are a good example, where from a designer having the idea of a Lego product to actually creating the damn thing and having it on shelves at Walmart or Target, you're looking at about 2 years, 18 months if you're lucky. We wanted to build an internal incubator to bring products to market quickly, but also develop communication quickly. Could we ever make a Lego campaign in about 12 weeks? And we did. And we set this up specifically for the adult range. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Lego actually has 70+ products every year designed for adult builders. So our internal incubator was focused on this as a microcosm, as one audience segment, where we tried to do things really quickly in a really rapid way. I also want to draw a really critical distinction between pilots and experiments. And I say this because a pilot in an organizational context, it often means that if it's successful, you're going to do it. Whereas an experiment, you don't actually know if it's going to be successful at all, and it very much might fail. So we don't do pilots, we do experiments, and we do a lot of them. And we're fully prepared that the response and the answer at the end of that experiment might be, well, that sucked, let's not do that again. So experiments over pilots, that's one piece of advice that I'll give. But this last one is super important. It's critical to bring the organization with you. Otherwise, you are just this incubation team playing with shiny objects while everybody else is in the trenches doing the work. So I think if you want to innovate in an organization and you want to have one of these incubators that is 1 foot in the company, 1 foot out, you need to consistently show results, and you need to regularly bring the business with you and solve some of their problems too. These are really critical learnings from this internal incubator that we've had. I'll also say that we're trying to ditch long-term plans, and this is funny for a company that makes building instructions, right? But all of our industry research tells us that the very best professionals in the market, so industry forecasters, for example, analysts, with all the right tools that they have, they can forecast out about 400 days. Most of us mere mortals, probably less than this, can forecast out about 150 days. So about 5 or 6 months if we're lucky. And this is because we live in a really complex environment where things are changing constantly. 2020 might be the best case in point. If you had a marketing plan for 2020, it's probably in the bin now. Unless you're a toilet paper organization, because they've done quite well. There's a really great concept from Shell, and rather than do 5-year plans, Shell does something called scenario planning, where they actually map out every potential option and every potential outcome. So they've got a plan for what if this environmental disruption occurs? What if a competitor surges from nowhere and overtakes us? They have benchmarks and frames for this, so that when it does happen, if it does happen, they can respond. It's more work, but it's a hell of a lot more accurate than keeping to create 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans. And this is something that we've also taken on board at Lego as well. Diversity is better ideas, and you'll see a lot of corporate execs put this in PowerPoint presentations, but I put it in here because Lego really does walk the talk on this. And we do it in 2 ways. And I think number 1 is the hiring policies. And it's not just about employing people of different races and sexual orientation. It's also about religions and beliefs and socioeconomic status and learned curriculum. I'm the proof. I went to a public school in Geelong, but somehow I'm here working in this great global company. It's really important to get people with a different curriculum background. And there is nothing more dangerous in an organization than the impending rampage of groupthink. And if you've got everybody in your marketing department that have come from the same business school, that is so dangerous, if you ask me. So we've tried to get people from very, very different backgrounds. And that's very relevant in the Lego agency. We are the most diverse part of the company. But I'll also say from a communication perspective as well, this is a great Danish conundrum. Is our communication representative of the people we serve? And anyone who's been to Denmark will know and acknowledge that it's a very white, homogenous country where most people think and act and dress and get paid relatively the same, which is a beautiful place to live in many ways, but not without its challenges. So we need to be really careful to make sure that when we're doing photography and casting for video content, that we're able to get talent that reflects the audience that plays with our product. A great example is recently we launched Lego.com in India. And it wasn't until we actually hit the button on that website that we realized really quickly that we didn't have a single photo of an Indian child playing with Lego. And that's a massive problem. That set off huge alarm bells in the company. What can we do better? We should be better. And a diversity and inclusion photo shoot followed, and really happy to say that we're taking some big strides in that place. So being able to hit the stop button sometime, everybody has a stop button, and everybody is able to critically challenge and say, maybe we should be doing this a little bit differently. Diversity in comms included. One more case study, and this was Lego Let's Go, and this was my favorite Lego campaign that I ever worked on, and I love talking through it. Lego sells a lot of space products. They come and they go through the portfolio, but in 2019 we had a lot of space products. We had a huge amount of space products, and we wanted a big message that could move the needle. And during our research around space and kids' attitudes around space, we stumbled across this survey from the 1960s, which of course was the Great Space Race. And in the survey, kids in the 60s were asked, what is your dream career? And kids responded, if you could have any job in the whole world, kids said, I want to be an astronaut. And we were curious about this. So in 2019, Lego ran the survey again. And in 2019, kids don't want to be astronauts. They want to be YouTubers and bloggers and celebrities and gamers and footballers. And there's nothing wrong with this. But for a brand like Lego, with space so deep in our DNA, we saw an issue with this. We wanted to find a way to make kids passionate about space again. So what you're about to see here is a wonderful campaign that goes beyond product to a much bigger mission. Can Lego, partnering with NASA, can we inspire kids around the world to fall in love with space again? And our campaign began with this really rich manifesto where we just wanted to pump up kids and get the adrenaline flowing and get kids excited about space again. And we used a really popular space influencer to voice our TV commercial and carry that message themselves. We then took the brand offline and did stuff that only big brands are allowed to do. We skimmed the New York Times. We ran a huge outdoor billboard campaign. There was one on Elizabeth Street in Melbourne. You might have seen it. We took over metro stations in the US. That was one in Washington. We held outdoor building events around the world. I think 8 or 9 countries. We asked kids to build their favorite things out of Lego, rockets, spaceships. Then the real kicker, we got our hands on this zero gravity commercial flight, and we convinced a former NASA astronaut, Mike Massimino, to get in this zero gravity flight and unbox Lego while floating in zero gravity. He failed enormously, but that wasn't the point. We weren't done, right? What we did then was we put our money where our mouth was, and we actually partnered with Scholastic to send 50 kids from 50 states to space camp, so kids could genuinely actually start their pathway to becoming astronauts. This campaign had a huge impact on kids around the world. Our after action reviews show us that we didn't just sell a lot of product, but we actually got kids, particularly in the US, excited about space again. And I use this one as a case study because it reminds me constantly that our role as a company is about much more than just product. It's about inspiring generations of kids. And because of our success as a company, we have a voice and a role to play for many of these issues. So I love sharing that one as well. That's the end of the first section. So I'm going to take a breath because I speak pretty fast most of the time. And then I'm going to kick off with the second section, which is all about creativity in life. And this one's a bit faster, so I'll get through this one pretty quickly as well. And what I've worked out is that you sleep better when you work for a purposeful, useful brand. And I am every day grateful to work for a company that has a bigger role beyond endless consumption. Yes, we sell a product, but we also inspire creativity in children. And we're also, doing so many good things. We're exploring sustainable alternatives to plastic. We're developing Braille bricks for blind children. 25% of our profits as a company are used charitably. So the impact this organization has is something that I really sleep well with. And I encourage you, if you're working in an organization that doesn't have values you align with, maybe you should look elsewhere, because I think this is important, and I keep coming back to it. And I put this in just because we're in the pandemic, and I've spoken to a lot of people that have reached out to me recently, and they've talked about they've lost their jobs, and particularly in Europe, where the pandemic is continuing to rage. I will say that you are one job interview away from changing your life, and I think I'm the proof in this. If you don't have a job, or if your job sucks, sometimes we feel like we are miles off track. But I just want to say, don't lose faith, because I think everything changes in an instant. And I think my own job application for Lego is a case in point. I was just mashing buttons on LinkedIn jobs, and I didn't even realize the role was in Denmark. I think I was just applying for it because it was Lego, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you don't apply, you don't get. So if there's an amazing organization in your industry that you want to apply for, but you haven't, because you maybe don't meet the requirements, just apply anyway and try your luck. Because I think the application is always worth putting in, because you never know what direction your life will be sucked into. I've also really figured out that you shouldn't stay too long in a job. And I say that as somebody who's been at Lego for 5 years. But what I will say is that, your first 12 months of a new job is focused on learning the business. It takes you 12 months to learn a big organization like Lego. Who are the people I reach out to? What's the process? How do I work? Where do I fit in? Where do I add value? The second 12 months, I think, is where people in a big company make their biggest impact, because they still have this rich outside knowledge from the real world, plus they now have the organizational knowledge to activate those ideas. But then I think after that, you often go through the cycle again. And I think people need to ask themselves a bit more often, am I still learning and growing? Or should I go and sell myself to the highest bidder? Because I think we see way too many people stay in cyclical jobs where maybe they are not learning and growing. And I think that's disappointing. So I think not staying too long in a job is a wonderful piece of advice. And I think it feels really good. This is one of the infinitely true things in life. It feels really good to quit a bad job. And I've quit jobs where I've sat in the chair for a week and it just didn't feel right. And I think that's okay, right? If your ideas aren't being listened to, quit. I think if you're waking up in a pool of sweat, dreading going into the office, quit. because I think your self-worth is worth so much more than any commercial enterprise. And Paul Arden, who's one of my great ad agency, ad industry writers, he writes about Steady Eddie versus Reckless Erica. And Steady Eddie stays at the same job his whole career, and he gradually climbs the ladder, getting a 2% pay rise every year. And then he retires. And then, Reckless Erica, she has these huge highs in her career, and then she bottoms out and gets fired, and then comes back on a higher salary and does really well, and is famous for this idea 5 years earlier. If you can choose who you want to be, I want to be Reckless Erica. I'm happy to bottom out so I can have those highs on the roller coaster. But you need to figure out, go your own way. Are you Steady Eddie or Reckless Erica, and what do you want to be? And there's also somebody that I won't often quote, but I will today, and that's Gary Vee. And he talks a lot about, if you don't like your 9 to 5, prioritize your 6 to 12. If you hate what you do during the day, you've got this window when you get home from work, maybe after you've fed the kids and the kids are in bed, you've got this period of time to think about, how do I change my 9 to 5? Do I get a new job? Do I become an entrepreneur? Do I start, freelancing? And for me, this is what kickstarted my freelancing career, which I still do on the side. It's because I was so bored with my 9 to 5 that I had to start doing it. So I think this is one small snippet of information from Gary Vaynerchuk that I will take with me as well. But I'll also say that you'd be so surprised how cross-functional your skill set might be. I went to law school, late in my career, which turned out to be a very expensive hobby in the end. But I think law school did make me a better marketer. It taught me to argue well. It taught me to read and to research, to go through very deep, long reports that I never previously had the patience to do. And I think most industries, and I write about this quite a bit, that industries need to get better at recognizing people who come from interesting and unusual pathways. And it's really nice to see big tech companies, particularly in the US, like Google and Twitter, they're saying you no longer need to have a university degree to work here. They're opening up the door to say that you might have adequate life experience, which is just as good. And I'll also say that your hobbies will also help you grow. And even if it's just, silly, fun hobbies, like in mine, photography and travel and coffee, these have opened so many doors for me. Even as something as simple as doing some portraits for a friend has opened up another door. My passion in coffee, I travel the world and I go to coffee shops and I talk to coffee shop owners and I learn about small businesses through doing that. So everything is connected. So don't ever disregard your hobbies, because I think they give you professional growth as well. And don't overthink, hit the publish button. And, these are just, some of my snippets on LinkedIn. I think the one on the left about Nike reached about 9 or 10 million people in the end. All of these posts and pieces of content that I create personally, I hover my finger over the button and I think, nobody's going to read this. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to absorb my content. And I think the big challenge in my life right now is allowing myself to be seen, allowing myself to hit the publish button. And maybe you're going through the same thing as well. So I think it takes huge bravery just to write something, write an opinion, publish something. And I think that's something that we could all do a little bit more of, is just putting yourself out there. And LinkedIn, just like this alumni community, I think it's the most wonderful network of professionals who want to help each other. So if you're not actively using LinkedIn, I encourage you to deep dive into it, because it's a really, really great platform. And I think everybody on this call would have something to share about your industry, and I'd love to see it. And this was really a wake-up call for me. What makes you successful once won't necessarily make you successful again. I think my attitude in the workplace has had to evolve. Nobody wants a gunslinging Aussie wearing chinos and a blazer, in the Nordics. I think, I came to Denmark and my ego was shut down pretty quickly. I think I was loud and obnoxious and I would interrupt people in meetings and those sort of things, regrettably, maybe made me successful in Australia. But I actually think to be successful in a different country, I really had to change who I was. I had to listen more. I had to be considerate. I had to be a collaborator rather than try and be the boss, right? So my perspective on that has changed massively. And you've got to adapt to new workforces, new environments, new countries. And I think my perspective on marketing has evolved considerably. And I think when I left Australia, 6 years ago, I was so obsessed with the tactics of marketing, and now all I want to do is change directions for Black brands and help them to pivot to new industries and solve huge problems at the top of the brand hierarchy and the top of the value chain. So my thinking with marketing has changed massively, and that's okay. And I think finding a way to routinely break yourself down and reboot who you are is also super important. And for me, and this picture in the background is of Apollo Bay. And for me, getting back to Australia every couple of years is just like a massive reset button where I can just absorb some peace and quiet and reboot and think, do I want to go back and do another couple of years of this? And then you'll find your own way to reboot as well. And a couple of slides left, but I just wanted to say that, take a gap year as an adult. And 2019, I left the Lego group for a year with no plans. My partner and I, we just spent 6 months living and traveling through Southeast Asia. And this was just the most wonderful experience. And people, people at the time thought I was crazy from walking away from such a great job. But for me, it's always worth the risk. And these 6 months in Asia, refined, my belief system, and it restored me. And I was super burnt out when I got there, but by the end of it, I had all these great new ideas. And I think I'm a better marketer having gone through this experience. The second 6 months, we moved to Norway. My partner is Norwegian, so we were able to spend some time there, and that was also worth it. And as it turned out, I found my way back to the company anyway. So if you're thinking about it, if you are lucky enough to be in a position in your life where you can do this, please think about taking a gap year. You won't regret it. And the final note, and this is the last slide that I'll share, and then I'll stop talking because I talk too much, but this is the law of fuck yes or no. And this is from Mark Manson, who is the author. You probably know the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he says that when you're faced in your life with decision-making, you essentially have two options. You have fuck yes or no. And if the answer is not fuck yes, then it should be no. And essentially what he's saying is that if you are not fuck yes about your job or your relationship or your friendship circle, then it should be a no. And that way you're constantly gravitating to things that you are passionate about and things that you love. And you're able to look around you and say, you know what, I don't want anybody else's life. I want mine because I've curated it. So Mark Manson does a lot of great writing on this topic, particularly around decision making. And I think this can apply to a personal context and an organizational context. If that idea doesn't jump off the page, maybe we shouldn't do it. And I'm constantly chasing fuck yes ideas in my work or in my personal life as well. And why do you want to do something that you kind of only maybe want to do? You should really want to do stuff and be deliberate about it as well. So thank you. I've talked very fast and I've talked a lot, but the whole point of this community, I guess, is to be two-way. So I would love to hear from each and every one of you. So please reach out. If you search for Ben Campbell Lego on LinkedIn, you'll find me. Instagram is where I share, I guess, my life behind the scenes, which is a very curated version of behind the scenes. And if you have any interest in reading about marketing and travel writing, then my website links to my Medium account, where I do lots of writing there as well. So thank you for your patience and for listening to me. I'm just super honored and privileged to have the chance to talk to you all today and be part of this great community.
All right, Erin, over to you for the Q&A.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you so much, Ben, for that fantastic presentation. We're going to open the floor to questions now. So if you do have a question, please do ask it. You can ask it by typing into the Q&A box. And Ben, our first question is about the Lego agency. Does the Lego agency have other clients besides Lego?
Ooh, that's a great topic. We talk about this a lot internally. Would we ever take on another client? Would we be brave enough to do that? Could we afford to do that? The answer at the moment is no. We do not have other clients besides Lego, but we do proactive pitches for other things in the industry that don't go anywhere. They stay internal, and really this is a test case for us to be able to stay on our toes and talk about things that are different kinds of products. So we take a lot of outside inspiration. We don't actively pitch for other accounts. I would love to do this. It would take a huge commitment of resource to do it. But I think we would all learn a lot from pitching for and working for other accounts as well.
We also have a question about growing in your position. And this is from Jennifer, who asks, you talked about making sure you're still growing. Considering you've worked in Lego for more than 4 years, what are your reasons for staying this long in Lego? And do you find yourself still growing there?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That's a good question. I'm absolutely still growing. That's why I'm still there. And I think for me, it's the global nature of the business. And, sometimes I'll be solving problems in the US, and sometimes I'll be trying to come up with a custom solution for Romania. And I might get sucked into a meeting with the Australia New Zealand team. And for me, it's that global scale allows me to rotate between different kinds of ideas and different kinds of activations. So that has kept me absolutely on my toes. And I think I'm still learning for sure. And I used to always say that I would never stay in a job this long, but I have. But I'm constantly being challenged, and I'm learning a lot about myself by doing this as well.
Rad has a question, and thanks you for a great overview of Lego and about how you go about driving innovation and creativity. And Brad asks, in the interests of that theme, how is Lego dealing with the disruptive forces of mobility, online social networking and gaming? How does Lego use innovation and creativity to stay relevant? I think there are a couple of questions in.
There's a few really good questions in that. So the last one, gaming, I'll address that first. I think gaming we recognize as something that is a huge driver of youth interaction. Kids, if they're not playing with Lego, they're gaming, they're touching digital experience. The company has made huge strides in our digital offering. So that's why you'll now see Lego sets that have an augmented reality function. Some of them better than others. We're constantly refining our product offering, but it's a lot more digital than it used to be. I'll also say in terms of our communication, I think we have a wonderful, wonderful social media team that does some really great work. We are always trying to innovate digitally as well. One of the challenges we have is that most of our audience is under the age of 13. So obviously we have to think of things like copy compliance and GDPR and communicating with children. We are running out of ways to reach kids, particularly as kids phase out from watching television. So that's always something that is on the tip of our challenges. How do we deal with this disruption? How do we continue to innovate? It's a question we ask ourselves every day, Brad. So thanks for raising that.
It's interesting that the group that you're working with, children, probably keep you on your toes in that sense, because childhood is always changing, and perhaps that is why Lego is so innovative as well, because you're learning from your target audience.
Yeah, that's why we exist, right?
We have a question about how you get your ideas. Do you wait for creative ideas to come to you, or do you have a method of generating ideas when you have a deadline approaching?
Yeah, what I'll say is a deadline never helps. And sometimes a good idea takes a day, and sometimes it takes a month. And I think having a lot of patience with the creative teams to unlock those great ideas. For me, creativity all comes down to human insights. And my job as a strategist is to find what is the human insight that can unlock a creative platform. And the space campaign is a good example of, in 2019, kids don't want to be astronauts, they want to be YouTubers, right? That was the insight. And that powered the creative team down a direction of saying, we need to inspire kids to be astronauts again. So for me, it always comes back to the human truth. It comes down for digging with a shovel sometimes through research reports and real data and analytics, and to try and find this stuff. But it's human behavior, it's sociology, it's anthropology. The answers are always in society. You just have to go and dig for them. And I think that's the way you reverse engineer a great creative idea. But I have lots of bad ideas too. I'd say I've had more bad ideas than good ideas.
Elliot has a question about solving a business problem, and he says, what are your top three questions to ask when you're trying to solve a business problem?
I'd say it's, who are we talking to? What problem are we trying to solve? And why should the audience care? I think they're probably the three things, and because that leads to doing things that are super purposeful. And quite often, I think in 2020, 21 we are now, I see so many brands talking about themselves, and we need to do better than that. We need to try and actually find a role in culture and a role in problem solving. So I think a big part of my job is running debriefs, essentially. So taking a marketing brief that will say we need to sell X amount of products to X audience. My job is to try and break that down and say, but why, and what is the purpose behind it, and then what happens, and being able to pitch all of those.
We have a question here from a 13-year-old boy from Torquay in Victoria, who says, it is my dream to work for Lego. Can you please provide me some advice on how to get my foot in the door?
That's so lovely. Please reach out individually. If you share my contact details, then I'd love to have an email with you. Yeah, I think we take inspiration from kids all around the world, and kids' ideas are the reason that we very, very much exist. We have a local Lego office in Sydney, so I'm sure there are always opportunities for us to work with kids and young talent and foster that. If you reach out, we can have a one-on-one session, and maybe I can tell you a bit more about the company and some different business areas that might interest you. I think you're never too young to start thinking about your career, and that was something that I wish I started a little bit earlier, because for me, my high schooling was just about sport. So I think for you, if you already know what you want to do and the kind of companies you want to work for, that's a wonderful start.
Then there are a couple of questions here about Lego's relationship with other brands. So Matt Delbridge has a question about Lego's relationship with other creative brands like Animal Logic, for example, and how this works.
Yeah, so we do so many partnerships now. There was a period last year where we kind of went partnership frenzy. And I think within the space of 2 weeks, we announced a partnership with IKEA and with Adidas. And so we have and Levi's as well. We have many different types of partnerships. Some of them are on a local or regional level. So the Australian, New Zealand market, for example, would be free to go and start their own local partnership with a local Australian brand, if that makes sense. And we would sort of give some oversight from global on that. We partner in 2 ways. I think one is a product partnership, and you'll see some really cool products from Adidas and Ninjago and Adidas and Lego and IKEA and Lego already on the shelves now. So product is definitely one way we partner, and the other way really is around media partnerships. How do we work closer with Snapchat, for example? How do we work closer with digital platforms? So I think it's on 2 different ways. We have a brand team that sits in Denmark that signs off a lot of these partnerships, and their role is to make sure that we are only aligning with brands that meet our framework and our quality of care. And we don't always get it right. There was a Lego case study from, I think it was about 10 years ago before my time, where we partnered with a particular petrol station around the world to give out Lego products. And Greenpeace weren't very happy with that, the fact that we were working so closely with a petrol company, and there was some PR implications on that one. But we're constantly learning and constantly reviewing the kind of third-party brands that we work with.
And a bit of a related question there. Alison has a question about the Lego Masters TV show, which is playing at the moment. And she asked, did you at Lego come up with that, or was it brought to you by someone else?
I wish we came up with it. It uses the Lego IP, but it was developed by a separate team. This is just on some of the IP, so they work on things like the Lego Movie. They work on big cinema productions. And this is essentially the side of the business that Lego Masters came from. We are always trying to reverse engineer Lego Masters to think, how can we create content and things around that? But at some stage, it's really difficult to work with a Hollywood production, essentially, and try and add our value, especially now that every country has its own Lego. I think the comment said it was a gift, and it is a gift for us, and we're so lucky that that people are able to use our IP and create such brilliant pieces of content. It's great to watch.
And we have a question from Antoinette, who is 12 years old from Uganda. And she asks, what other companies does Lego work with other than NASA? And she has 2 questions. How else can Lego engage children at present? Do you have an online program for kids?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different, so the big brands we partner with, I listed some of them before, so there's Adidas and Levi's and IKEA. They're some of our big collaboration partners, but also we partner with UNICEF. Again, NASA we partnered with on certain products for the space campaigns. How can young kids best get involved with Lego? We have a digital app called Lego Life, which is the Lego solution. You can find it on the Android and the iOS App Store. It's called Lego Life, and that is a way for kids around the world to share their Lego creations. Otherwise, probably another good idea is to call into your local Lego store and have some face-to-face time with the employees and the staff, and that's a relationship that we're really proud to foster, that any kid can go into a Lego store anywhere in the world and have those the chances to build with hands on bricks. And you're super lucky in Australia that you're one of very few countries in the world that have shops open right now. We've had our retail stores in the US, for example, closed for about 16 months now. So get into your local Lego store, put your hand on some bricks, and talk to the team. I'm sure they'll love to have you there.
Thanks, Ben. Lewis has a question picking up on your point about cultural diversity, asking how does Lego live and grow in a culturally diverse world?
Yeah, it's a constant evolution, and the company itself has changed massively since I joined in 2017. I would say that we were a very Danish company in 2017, whereas now in the advertising agent, in the Lego agency, I'd say that we have, I'd say more than probably 60% of the team is from somewhere that is not Denmark, which is wonderful in terms of ideas. But we often need to ask ourselves, are we losing our Danish culture? Versus do we want to import this? Do we want to import this frenetic work culture from the UK or from the US? Or do we want to maintain what we have? That's a constant arm wrestle that we, the leadership of the organization has to constantly deal with. But I think we're constantly evolving. As kids change, as adults change, we try and go with them. The pandemic is a great example of people around the world bored with nothing to do, and Lego provided a really purposeful response to that. And we've had a wonderful year, despite the fact that the pandemic is raging, because we've had a useful product. Following trends. I mean, like 2 years ago, we saw the boom of adult coloring books, for example, and adult jigsaw puzzles, and we said, well, maybe Lego has a role to play there too. So listening to culture and society, and constantly reverse engineering it, I guess.
I can certainly second that as a parent who had children during the pandemic last year and during the lockdown, and the amount of time we all spent as a family playing Lego was incredible. We have time for one last question, and this question comes from Jennifer, and she asks, what is the most challenging part of your job?
I think it's batting up again and again and again, and coming up with a great idea, executing it, and then the next day a new brief lands on your desk. I think it's constantly keeping yourself fresh and not getting burnt out, because I think when you are forced to come up with great strategic work and great ideas all the time, I think everything merges into one. So I'd say that's one of it. And if I had to call out one other thing, it's probably trying to force big, innovative ideas in a really agile way through a large, complex organization. Trying to convince 100 people that we should do something really fun and ridiculous and crazy. It's fun at the end, but there's a huge bureaucratic process to get there. So definitely the scale of the organization gives a lot of challenges, but that would be the same, I imagine, Erin, like working in a university or working in government. And the bigger the organization, the more hoops you have to climb to bring things to action. I have a lot of admiration for startups, because they can just get cracking and bring stuff to their audience overnight. We don't have that same luxury.
Well, those are all the questions we have time for. Thank you so much, Ben, for such a thought-provoking discussion. And thanks to all of you who participated and who tuned in today. I'll pass back to you now, Sam, to wrap up.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Erin. And I agree. Thank you, Ben, for that fantastic presentation. Thanks as well to Matt Delbridge and Erin for running the Q&A, and for our wonderful support behind the scenes from the UK Europe chapter with Mel and Ursula. It's been great. I've just got a few messages I'd love to share from the alumni team. And first and foremost, we'd love to stay in touch with you. Please do stay connected with Deakin alumni to hear more about exciting upcoming virtual and in-person events such as this one. Particularly if you're in the UK and Europe, we may not have contacted you for a while. So make sure we have your email address by contacting us at deakin.edu.au. Please do follow us on social media there, and also you can visit the alumni website at the Deakin website as well. Please stay up to date with us. Also, Deakin is working very hard to support students affected by COVID-19, and there is a Student Emergency Assistance Fund which distributes emergency grants of up to $500 to students experiencing financial distress. If you're in a position to do so, please do consider supporting this really worthy program. Please head to the Deakin website for more information. Thank you very much for joining us again. Please do feel free to send any feedback through to deakinalumni@deakin.edu.au. We hope to see you again at one of these soon. once again, thanks to everyone involved on this event, and stay safe, and we'll see you again next time.